At the end of the 19th century, the Danish king Christian IX and his queen Louisa succeeded in marrying their 6 children into the leading European royal families, and Christian IX thus became known as the father-in-law of Europe. Today, his family is found all over Europe, and quite exceptionally, these royal descendants have chosen to come together and talk about their family's incredible story, which they know from letters and diaries, and from the stories that have been passed down to them through the generations. In addition, the family has also made private photos and films available, many of which have never been seen in public before. This episode is about Christian IX's 2 youngest children, Thyra and Valdemar. The relaxed Valdemar turned down numerous offers to be king. He married a tattooed French princess, with whom he had many disobedient children.
She taught me how to roll small balls out of the bread and to shoot them off into other people's champagne glasses.
Little Princess Thyra arrives in 1853, a couple of months after her father, Prince Christian, has been named as heir to the throne. Alexandra and Dagmar are delighted to have a little sister, and Thyra isn't very old before she is out riding with her elder sisters. A few years later, the family's youngest child, Prince Valdemar, is born at Bernstorff Castle, Christian's new summer residence. It doesn't take Valdemar long to start joining in with his older siblings, also when they're visiting the docks in Copenhagen.
He was taken very well care of by his brothers and sisters who loved him dearly and who supposedly often took him along for a stroll in the streets of Copenhagen, particularly to New Haven, a little canal street by the harbor of Copenhagen, where a lot of sailors were sitting, and he might have caught interest in sailing later on in his life through that part of his childhood.
Valdemar dreams of being a sailor, and so he's not especially pleased when he receives a gift from his elder brother, the King of Greece.
Prince Valdemar was sent some Greek costumes by his elder brother from Greece, of course, and as a small boy, he was dressed up in this, and one of the parts of this dress was a skirt, which Prince Valdemar wasn't very fond of wearing.
They thought I was so lovely in the little white starched skirt, which is part of the Greek national costume, but I, being shown off and photographed in it, found it quite awful, and thought that the skirt was unworthy of clothing of a real man. Valdemar and Thyra are educated at home. Like her sisters, Thyra has inherited Queen Louisa's artistic talents, and she can often be found in the Queen's studio, where she loves spending time with her paints and brushes. But the best entertainment of all is when the famous writer Hans Christian Andersen comes to visit and to read them his stories.
Hans Christian Andersen, of course, was a monumental snob. And but of course also a very great artist, a wonderful writer, and he had known the people around the royal family always. They went to visit him, and he was asked to come and to read his stories, and he dedicated many volumes of his books to members of the royal family.
Hans Christian Andersen had been to Amalienborg for dinner, and he didn't feel very well, which happened once in a while. The next morning, the king was feeling worried about the health of Hans Christian Andersen, so he went in the carriage with his son, Prince Valdemar.
And when they arrive at Hans Christian Andersen's house, the writer is immensely moved. I was moved. Tears came to my eyes. He affectionately shook my hand and said that I looked better than he had thought, and that I wasn't wearing my teeth suited me much better than the false teeth I had worn. It's exciting to visit Hans Christian Andersen, especially because the writer's house is located in Newhaven, where the sailors sit and tell their tales. Yet Valdemar still has to wait a year or two before he can begin his maritime education. Tura makes her social debut at 17 and begins to attract the interest of a number of foreign princes. Tura writes to her sister Dagmar in Russia. "Can you imagine anything as awful as turning 17? It's absolutely awful becoming this old. If you were here, we could enjoy ourselves. I feel so immensely lonely. Poor little me." Tura's sisters have already married well, one to the heir to the British throne and the other to the heir to the Russian throne. And Queen Louisa knows that it will be difficult to find an equally good match for Tura.
I think she was not the nicest of these three sisters, but I think the most interesting.
Whilst her parents debate who she should marry, Tura falls in love with Wilhelm Marker, an army officer. And he is equally smitten with a young princess. Queen Louisa is aware of the romance, but sees it as nothing more than a youthful fling. After a long journey, Tura stays in Greece. Back in Denmark, a family council has decided that the official reason for Tura's journey is to visit her elder brother, King George of Greece. Yet her journey has been undertaken for an entirely different reason. The 18-year-old princess is pregnant.
Tyra had a daughter, a daughter, before she was married. And the father was an officer of the guard. It's not something you boast about, but we've heard about it, at least in the Danish family.
Reports from Athens that Tura is not well worry Christian IX, and together with Valdemar, he decides to travel to Greece. Tura's daughter is put up for adoption at birth, and after Tura has recovered, the family travels to Rome. They stay here for the next couple of months, and Tura is doing very well considering her situation. The Crown Prince of Hanover is also here. He's really very nice, except that he has no nose. Back in Denmark, Wilhelm Marker is distraught at having placed his princess in such an untenable situation, and he decides to take his own life. In Rome, Tura breaks down when she finds out that her beloved is dead. At the same time, she is also diagnosed as having typhoid. Queen Louisa is extremely concerned. I am sitting in semi-darkness at Tura's side. She is calm, but weak, though the doctor says her pulse is good. The fever is stronger today. By chance, the British royal doctor is in the area, and whilst the family watches despairingly, he finally succeeds in saving Tura's life, enabling her to return to Denmark. Home safe, a highly respected suitor announces his intentions. It's the Dutch king and widower Wilhelm III, but he is 36 years older than Tura and has to accept being turned down. Ernst August, ex-Crown Prince of Hanover, whom Tura had met in Rome, is also showing an interest in the young princess, and he is Queen Louisa's favorite. Even though his father, George V, had been forced from the throne, Louisa is certain that Ernst August will one day be King of Hanover. Ernst August's blind father had to give up the throne when he found himself on the losing side in the war against Bismarck's great Prussian kingdom.
I'm sure that it was also because King George V was blind. He couldn't really, in words, he couldn't really see the problems.
This was a disaster for the Hanoverian people, and to all intents and purposes, the son, Ernst August, must accept being reduced to nothing. When George V dies in exile, Ernst August chooses to adopt his father's British title, the Duke of Cumberland. The tall, thin Ernst August is far from being the ideal prince. With his flat face and poor taste in clothes, he is the subject of much amused conversation amongst Europe's royalty. Yet he is also much loved by them all. And Tura's sister Alexandra, who is married to the heir to the British throne, is keen to see Ernst August marry into the Danish royal family. During a family visit to Germany in 1878, Queen Louisa announces that she has to attend a consultation with an optician. But in reality, she is to observe a meeting which she and Alexandra have arranged for Tura. Tura is very excited. She is to have a secret meeting with Ernst August. Mama whispered to the whole family that she had an appointment with an eye doctor in Frankfurt, and accompanied by unbelievably many apologies, the three of us calmly left. The meeting takes place at an aunt's house, and from her position behind the door in an adjacent room, it's possible for Alexandra to follow the development of the first signs of love between them. She gave him her hand, which he immediately kissed, and then she said how very much she enjoyed seeing him again. I could only see around the corner with one eye as they once again pressed each other's hands, and he lay one kiss after the other upon them. Mama and I could have saved ourselves our long conversation with him, because she cut the whole procedure short by proposing herself. Britain's Queen Victoria has earlier attempted to marry off one of her sons to Tura, but was turned down. And now Queen Victoria exclaims that Tura's engagement is completely without foundation. She believes that Ernst August is a prince without a kingdom, without a fortune, and without a future. She has very little positive to say about Tura either. Her eyes are beautiful, but I have never seen such an awful mouth without a chin, and such a thick, flat nose. Her figure is bony, and she moves very clumsily. Tura marries Ernst August at Christmas. The wedding is held in Copenhagen. After the wedding, the couple moves to Austria.
They lived in Gmunden, which is a small village in Austria, and first they were living in a small house. And as the family grew and they had a lot of children, they built a house called Schloss Cumberland.
The children grow up in a warm home, as Tura and Ernst August prefer the quiet of family life in Gmunden to participating in European royal occasions. Ernst August prefers to be at home, where he can pursue his great passion.
He was a great shooter and a hunting enthusiast, and did particularly hunting in Austria for the chamois or the gems in the highlands. And she sort of insisted to stay with him, by his side, literally.
Tura is only occasionally able to persuade her husband to make the journey to Denmark, where the rest of the widely dispersed family chooses to gather. Ernst August hates to travel, and he despises court etiquette. The Greek princes, however, find his behavior somewhat strange. Ernst August was very original, and he only wore Tyrolean attire. When he very rarely ate at the court in Denmark, he changed back into his Tyrolean clothes the moment the dinner was over. Tura loves spending time with her family in Denmark, and she enjoys playing the piano, eight-handed, together with her sisters and her mother. In Denmark, Tura's younger brother, Valdemar, is well underway with his naval training.
Prince Valdemar was brought up as a naval officer and therefore was quite a lot at sea. He had naval commands, went on several long trips.
It means everything to serve, and 26-year-old Valdemar does not wish to be given any special treatment. He works as an equal with his comrades. Queen Louisa is now occupied trying to find a bride for Valdemar. After the elder children's successful marriages in Britain, Russia, Greece and Sweden, it's difficult to ignore the great power, France. Emperor Napoleon III has died in exile, and Louisa believes that there is a possibility that France will restore the monarchy. The good old Bourbons from the country's great pre-revolutionary royal period might possibly make a return to the French throne. So a marriage to a member of this family would obviously be a very good match. A great-granddaughter of the last king of France proves to be a possibility. She is the very independent and somewhat eccentric Princess Marie of Orléans. Queen Louisa has already established a good relationship with Marie's parents. And in 1885, Marie's father sends an invitation to Valdemar. But Princess Marie doesn't know she's receiving a visitor. I was received most warmly by the Duke and Duchess, and while we sat talking, a young 20-year-old girl opened the door. In her surprise at seeing a guest, she spilled a cup of paint she was holding in her hand all over herself. Blushing, she disappeared to recompose herself.
When Marie d'Orléans was living with her parents, they were living near Le Havre at a farm which was very poor. They had to maintain the place completely themselves. They had no gardener, no servants.
Marie has a very unusual and forceful personality. She's intelligent, quick-witted, and completely unimpressed by the royal way of life. And princess or not, she does whatever she wants.
She was an unusual personality. She had rather unusual interests, and she was very forthright, especially. She would sort of say exactly what she felt.
In Britain, Queen Victoria is well aware of the French princess's potential, and Marie has already been invited to Windsor. I was so blinded by all of the unfurled magnificence, and when the Queen finally asked me if I wanted to live in England, I gave the awfully stupid answer, "No, it's much too grand here." And so the Queen gave up on me. Valdemar has more luck. Marie finds him very attractive, and she accepts his proposal of marriage. The hopeful parents have already taken care of all the formalities, and it takes only 3 days for the Pope to grant permission for the couple to marry.
It was highly unusual, in fact, because, of course, she was a Catholic and he was a Lutheran. An arrangement was made with the Catholic Church that the sons of the marriage would become Lutheran and daughters would become Catholic.
Marie immediately starts preparing for her new life in Denmark, and she corresponds regularly with Valdemar. "I hope that when I come to Denmark, I can ride with you and the king, because I would so very much like you to allow me to bring my good horse." 1,500 guests take part in Marie and Valdemar's wedding in France. Marie and Valdemar arrive in Copenhagen as newlyweds. At their new residence, the Yellow Palace, an official who holds a welcome speech in their honor greets the couple.
Just as he was sort of standing and reading aloud his speech and being very formal, a bouquet of flowers was thrown by the crowd to the princess, the coming princess. But the sort of mishap had it that it went right through the carriage window. Instead of stopping in the hands of the princess, went straight through the other window and landed in the face of this dignitary.
This is the first opportunity Copenhageners have had to hear Marie's spontaneous laughter. And with her unpretentious style, it's not long before she is well loved by the Danes. A year after the wedding, Valdemar announces to Marie that he has been given the opportunity to take over the Bulgarian throne. Valdemar's brother-in-law, Russia's Tsar Alexander III, has had enough of the sovereign prince of Bulgaria, who is taking more and more liberties. Yet Valdemar turns the offer down.
His wife, Princess Marie, there was no way you would drag her down to Bulgaria.
Prince Valdemar has no great desire to be king of Bulgaria either.
He was not too happy to go there, first and foremost, because they would immediately put him as an enemy of his very dear brother, George of Greece.
Bulgaria and Greece were often in position as enemies. There had been wars between them, and there were later on. And I'm sure that the two brothers felt that situation would be an impossible situation for them.
And in any case, Valdemar and Marie very much enjoy living in Denmark. Marie is keen to learn Danish and listens intently to Valdemar and his friends.
As some of these friends were from the Navy and it was quite a dirty language, very rough, she of course learned that. And once in a while when she was out with people, she said something in Danish and people were shocked of her tongue.
When other members of the family are visiting from abroad, Marie teaches her nephews, the heirs to the Greek, Russian and British thrones, how to play a decent game of cards. And she has her own very individual way of dealing with royal etiquette when it comes to playing the piano. Once, when I was asked to play, I did it in such a way that I put the musical part of the family to shame. I was never asked to repeat the experiment. During a 6-year period, Marie gives birth to the couple's first 4 children, the princes Oer, Axel, Eric and Viggo. After the birth of Viggo, Marie's doctor prescribes some pain-killing morphine for her. Marie subsequently finds it difficult to control her consumption of the drug, and only the family is aware of the real reason for her lengthy period of rehabilitation in the summer of 1894. In Russia, Valdemar's sister-in-law, Dagmar, is worried about Marie's condition. Just as long as she hasn't started drinking again, which she fortunately otherwise had stopped doing. Poor Valdemar, I feel so terribly sorry for. He must be desperate in every way. But with God's assistance, it is only temporary, and I hope she will recover completely and never again touch that gruesome morphine which ruins your health. After an absence of 3 weeks, Marie is clearly well on the way to recovery when she returns to Copenhagen. The following year, Marie gives birth to the couple's last child, little Princess Margrethe.
Their nickname was the naughty children from the Yellow Palace. That was because they were not always very well behaved.
And Marie has more than enough to do trying to keep control of her lively sons when they take their annual family portrait. One day, the naughty ones are invited to tea with their distinguished aunts, the Queen of England and the Empress of Russia, who have a summer residence north of Copenhagen. They leave by train, dressed in newly washed and pressed white sailor outfits.
And they crawled over the carriages until they came to the tender, and then they bombarded the stoker with coal, and he didn't approve of it, so he bombarded them with coal.
The naughty ones are not easy to control at home either. They are looking forward to winter, when the winter double glazing is put up in the Yellow Palace.
They ask one of the servants to open a top window. As soon as he is up there, they close the second window, so he's in between them and cannot get out. And he was actually there for quite some time.
The marriage does not change Valdemar's lifestyle, and he continues his naval career. His cruises take him to the West Indies, Constantinople, India, China, and Japan, where he successfully represents Denmark. When he is finally home with Marie, the house is always full of visitors, and the guest book reveals a somewhat non-traditional royal existence.
they saw actors, painters, and generally people from the artistic world. They must have had a very entertaining life in that sense, because they really knew everybody who was on stage during those years, literally on stage, but also whoever was hip.
And it's always exciting spending time in Princess Marie's company. She also has an extraordinary artistic talent.
She was a very good artist, very good artist. She painted especially watercolors, and especially fruits, flowers. And she's made some marvelous paintings of mushrooms, marvelous mushrooms, really beautifully done.
Her artistic talents are not limited to painting alone.
Mostly she designed for the Royal Porcelain Factory a series of exotic animals, such as a hippopotamus. Is probably the best known artifact from her.
As the wife of a sailor prince, Marie has an anchor tattooed on her left arm. And she's an expert at embarrassing her husband when she makes fun of the distinguished women of the royal court.
Princess Marie used to call the ladies-in-waiting, which in French is dames d'honneur. She called them dames d'horreur, which is the horrible ladies.
Marie is happiest away from stiff royal etiquette. And she thoroughly enjoys her daily rides on her horse, Boy.
My grandmother enjoyed riding very much. And she also had a lady's saddle made for a bull, so she also tried riding a bull, which was rather extraordinary.
I think she was much admired, and I think people enjoyed this very different sort of person that she was.
When Marie hears that one of Copenhagen's lonely eccentrics has died, she turns up unannounced at the funeral.
There was a lady here, or a woman here in Denmark called Virgin Pastime, and at her funeral, actually, Princess Marie was the only one attending.
There's a fire in Copenhagen, and on her way past, Marie hears that a fireman has fallen to his death. When she discovers that the man's widow and children will now have to fend for themselves, she establishes a fund for firemen's widows. She is presented with a fireman's helmet in thanks, and is named an honorary fireman.
And every time that she would listen at the bell of a fire, even if it was during an official function, she would leave the table, take off her tiara, put her casque of a fireman, and rush to the place of the fire to try to help, delighted.
The Danes are beginning to get used to their fearless French princess, who more than lives up to her own publicly known motto, "Let them grumble, I don't care."
She was totally eccentric. She did whatever she wanted. She was very happy in Denmark, and also under that eccentricity of an artistic princess, I think she was deeply interested in politics like all the members of the Orléans family.
Amongst others, Marie provides her nephew, Tsar Nicholas II, with a lot of unsolicited advice. And he learns to get straight to the point when replying. "I have done what you asked of me, and can now give you a completely clear answer. It is a categorical no, and the case can now be closed." However, it's considered quite natural that the Russian Tsar interferes in European politics. In 1905, when Norway needs a king, Nicholas II and Kaiser Wilhelm in Germany agree that Valdemar would be a fine choice. For as Emperor Wilhelm says, Valdemar has the required experience, a delightful and elegant wife, and healthy offspring. Yet Valdemar refuses. Instead, he would like to see the task passed on to his nephew, Prince Karl. Valdemar really has no other ambition in life than to be a sailor prince. Many new forms of transport make their appearance during this time. And in Copenhagen, horse-drawn carriages now have to share the streets with electric trams. And the royal family watches with great interest when in 1907, a Dane, Ellehammer, manages to fly an aircraft 461 yards, the longest ever flown by a European. The time Valdemar spends together with his wife and children is limited, due to the fact that he has an exceptionally close relationship with his Greek nephew, Prince George, whose company he values very highly.
George, or known as Goggy or Uncle Goggy in the family, was very, very close to Prince Valdemar, and they went everywhere together. They were very firm friends.
In the final years of her life, Marie is lonely in her husband's absence. When Valdemar leaves once again for Asia, this time with his 3 eldest sons, none of them know that they have seen Marie for the last time. Marie is ill, and when Dagmar visits her sister-in-law, Marie appears to be very confused. From the first moment, she didn't recognize me. She sat on the bed in a shift and bare feet and insisted on dressing to go hunting. The illness has affected her mind completely. Marie has acute pneumonia, and her doctors are powerless to help. A week after Dagmar's visit, Marie drifts into unconsciousness and dies.
In the evening that my grandmother died, Marie, Uncle Goggy saw a butterfly flying over the ship, and he knew she died.
It is impossible to preserve Marie's body due to the temperature in the Yellow Palace, and only her closest relatives manage to say farewell before she is placed in a zinc coffin, which is then welded shut. Upon Valdemar's return, Marie's sealed coffin lies in Holman's church, awaiting its final journey. And Valdemar must now begin to get used to the idea of being a widower for the next 30 years.
I just remember that my grandfather, Prince Valdemar, always kept her apartments like that she just was still there, like she'd gone on a journey and just came back. And we weren't allowed as children to go there, not to move anything.
The many parties and society events previously held at the Yellow Palace are no longer, and Marie and Valdemar's 5 children leave home as they marry. The eldest of Valdemar and Marie's sons, Oer, has inherited his mother's Gallic temperament. And without consulting his father, he marries an Italian duchess in Rome in 1914. Valdemar immediately demands a meeting with his son.
The first thing he did was to slap Prince O's face, but then he turned around to his future daughter-in-law and congratulated her.
The marriage does not work out, and Oer loses his fortune when Denmark's largest bank collapses in 1922. He yearns to get away and joins the Foreign Legion, in which he serves until dying of pneumonia 18 years later. The second son, Axel, marries Princess Margareta of Sweden. He joins the East Asiatic Company, a large Danish multinational, where he becomes a director. But when he is with his siblings, it's easy to recognize the disobedient children from the Yellow Palace.
My father and his brothers and sister, they got an idea of they should try to put their cars in reverse and then go as slowly as possible. And then they all got out and stood on the front steps, and the one who got hit first had lost.
Axel and Margareta are the parents of Count Fleming of Rosenborg, who was married to Countess Ruth until his death in 2002. Viggo has a very close relationship with his brother Axel, who he often holidays with in Sweden. Viggo becomes an army officer and marries the immensely wealthy American Eleanor Green, but the couple have no children. The social couple, who are known as Prince and Princess Viggo, remain in Denmark. Erik chooses to become a farmer and his training takes place partly in Canada.
While he was there, he met Louise Booth, my grandmother, who was a daughter of a timber king in Canada.
Amongst Eric's descendants today is the shipbroker Count Valdemar of Rosenborg, who is married to a French woman. The daughter, Margrethe, marries the French prince René Bourbon-Parme and settles in Paris. During the Second World War, they escape with their children to the USA, where Margrethe finds employment in an exclusive hat shop. One day, the Norwegian Crown Princess Märtha comes into the shop looking for a new hat. While she's trying on a new hat, she places her own hat on a nearby chair.
Another lady came in and put it on, you know, looked at it like that and all that. So Mommy said, "Oh, doesn't it suit you?" So then the lady said, "It's very nice. Can I buy it?" So Mommy, of course, said, "Of course," you know, and said the price of it and all that. And on Märtha was on the other side, trying hats on the other side. Then when she had to leave, she said to Mommy, "But where's my hat? I had a hat when I came. There's something going on here," because they were cousins. So Mommy said, "I'm awfully sorry. I made a good deal with your hat." Jean and Märtha didn't get a hat but laughed.
Margrethe remains the family's always entertaining favorite aunt.
We used to laugh a lot at her and the way she spoke and the way she told stories. And I think as small children we looked up to her because she had a sort of quite a naughty twinkle in her eye.
Even in old age, Margrethe loves nothing more than disrupting the great royal occasions of the day.
I remember at a rather grand dinner at Fredensborg, I sat next to her and she taught me how to roll small balls out of the bread and to shoot them off into other people's champagne glasses. And I remember when she did her, I wouldn't say coup de grâce, but her bullseye shot. She hit my father's champagne glass just by the time he was taking it, so that, and he knew exactly where to turn to. That was what shocked me most. It wasn't to me, it was to her.
Since 1948, Margrethe's only daughter, Anne, has been married to another of Christian IX's descendants, Michael, the former king of Romania. Back in 1887, Tura and Ernst August have been married for 9 years when Tura begins to exhibit a form of very strange behavior. She runs around the house at night in a state of confusion because she thinks that she can hear a child crying. Tura is admitted to a clinic, yet her sister Dagmar does not agree with the Austrian methods of treatment. What will she think when she asks where she is and they tell her she is traveling, and when she doesn't see any of the usual faces around her? It is much too awful to think of her in such agony. It is established that Tura is pregnant, and she will not return home until 6 months later. Ernst August is now easily annoyed and irritable. He also suffers from the occasional anxiety attack, and Tura has to sit and calm him for hours on end.
The Duke of Cumberland had a skin illness, and he couldn't use new clothes. They must have been used at least a year in advance by a servant.
Dagmar comes to hear of Ernst August's problems. Tura said that he cried every morning like a baby and complained that he felt his clothes made him feel uncomfortable. Ernst August's health improves for periods, and he even chooses to travel with Tura to Denmark. Here, surrounded by her family, Dagmar cannot resist teasing Ernst August. Ernst is well again and went hunting today in such a shabby and dirty suit that I gave him 25 öre because I assumed he was a beggar. Members of the Danish royal family have always been very keen on games. and croquet has been played at the summer gatherings for many years. And Christian IX enjoys playing whist with his daughters, Tura, Dagmar, and Alexandra. During her visit this time, Tura presents her father with a somewhat unusual gift, an electric cigar lighter. It is given pride of place on his desk at home in Amalienborg. Tura's brother, Frederick VIII of Denmark, dies in 1912, and a few days later, Tura and Ernst August receive some shocking news about their eldest son, George.
Being a very close relative to King Frederick VIII, he has to go to the funeral. On his way to Copenhagen, he has a car accident. He is killed, and obviously his younger brother, Ernst August, then becomes the head of the family, and that's how the Hanover family have continued as of today.
As the accident has taken place in Germany, Kaiser Wilhelm organizes a guard of honor, and Tura and Ernst August politely send their youngest son, who's also called Ernst August, to Berlin to represent them and thank the Kaiser for his efforts on behalf of their dead son. Whilst in Berlin, the 25-year-old Ernst August falls in love with the Kaiser's daughter, Victoria, and a wedding is soon arranged. Yet it is difficult for Tura and Ernst August to accept that their son is now marrying into the family that forced the Hanoverians from the throne. The Cumberlands have suffered much at the hands of the ambitious Kaiser, and there can never be a happy reconciliation between the families. Yet Ernst August will not stand in the way of his son's happiness, and at the wedding in Berlin, he finds himself driving in an open carriage sitting beside his arch-enemy, Kaiser Wilhelm.
I think that was the last time all the heads of state of the Europe of that time ever met. In other words, the Tsar was there, the King of England was there, and certainly the Kaiser was there.
By virtue of his marriage to the Kaiser's daughter, Ernst August becomes the reigning prince in the Duchy of Brunswick. But the pleasure is short-lived, as the following year the First World War breaks out, destroying the imperial thrones of Germany, Russia, and Austria. Some years previously, in Gmunden, Tura and Ernst August's eldest daughter, Marie-Louise, had married Prince Maximilian of Baden, a highly respected officer attached to the court of Kaiser Wilhelm. Tura and Ernst August have a very good relationship with their son-in-law, as long as he doesn't talk too much about the German Kaiser in their home. At the end of the First World War, Kaiser Wilhelm makes Maximilian the German Chancellor, in the hope that he will be able to save what remains of the German Empire in the chaos to follow. Yet Maximilian sees only one solution, and announces the Kaiser's abdication. And Kaiser Wilhelm is therefore forced to spend the rest of his life in exile in Holland.
After 1918, there were no duchesses anymore. The war was over. The king and emperor didn't exist anymore.
As the aging Ernst August has supported Austria during the war, the British strip him of his royal title, Duke of Cumberland. Both he and Tura are heartbroken. My poor Duke suffers much from it, though he won't think ill of people's intentions. It seems that England has destroyed my Duke and accuses him of treason. Tura becomes very lonely when Ernst August, after 45 years of marriage, dies in 1923, and she plans a visit to the family in Denmark. Later in the summer, I hope to travel to Denmark after 11 years' absence. I am so grateful now at not having traveled home during these years. I stayed purely out of fear that something would happen to my Duke in my absence. In Gmunden, Tura moves out of Schloss Cumberland and into a smaller residence close by. And Tura's new residence becomes a place for her children and grandchildren to meet. Here come Tura's 3 daughters, who visit as often as they possibly can. And much to Tura's pleasure, they stay for days at a time together with their own families. Tura has become a white-haired, slightly deaf old lady. When she writes to her nephew, George V in Britain, "Now I am growing very old, dear Georgie. I am glad to be able to thank you for all of your sweet letters. Please give my love to dear May. It's all so long, long ago." The year before her death, Tura visits Denmark for the last time. And in 1933, Tura passes away peacefully in her home in Gmunden. Among Tura's descendants is her great-grandson, Prince Heinrich of Hanover. He is a businessman and lives near Hanover together with his wife and children. His elder brother is Prince Ernst August of Hanover, who bears the same name as his father, grandfather, and great-grandfather. He is married to Princess Caroline of Monaco. The couple both have children from previous marriages, as well as their own daughter, Princess Alexandra. Tura and Ernst August's other descendants today include Constantine II of Greece, Queen Sophia of Spain, Duchess Donata of Mecklenburg-Solotkov, who lives together with her family near Kiel, as well as Princess Elisabeth Isenburg und Büdingen, who today runs Glücksborg Castle, the castle where nearly 200 years ago the father-in-law of Europe lived as a boy. In 1939, the last of Christian IX's children, Prince Valdemar, the man who did not want to be king, dies peacefully after a short illness, aged 80.
Valdemar became known in his older days as the uncle of all kings. All his nephews were Tsars or kings in Russia, Denmark, England, Greece, Norway. So it was a fantastic title, I would say, to be.
When Europe's royals meet today, the great majority of them come from the same family, a dynasty that can trace its roots back to the Danish King Christian IX, the father-in-law of Europe. In numerous cases, both spouses are descendants of Christian IX. This applies to Britain's Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip, Constantine II of Greece, and Queen Anne-Marie, as well as Romania's former King Michael and his wife, Queen Anne. Christian IX had 6 children, and despite the fact that they ended up living a long way from each other, the 6 siblings maintained their very close relationship throughout their lives. The eldest son became, as Frederick VIII, King of Denmark on the death of his father, and through his children, the descendants found their way to Norway, Sweden, Belgium, and Luxembourg. Christian IX's eldest daughter, Alexandra, became Queen of Great Britain through her marriage to Edward VII. Today, her descendants can be found in Britain and Norway. The second daughter, Dagmar, was the last great Tsarina. Yet the revolution and the murder of her son, Nicholas II, put an end to the Tsars in Russia. 2 daughters who escaped from Russia have descendants in the USA, Canada, and Europe. Christian IX's second son became King George I of Greece when only 17 years old. Today, Greece, Italy, Yugoslavia, and Romania are without a crowned head of state, but not without a royal family. And all have descendants of George I. In addition, 2 of his descendants married the Spanish and British monarchs. The youngest daughter, Princess Tura, never became Queen of Hanover as her mother had hoped. Yet through her, the descendants of the father-in-law of Europe have ended up in Germany, Austria, and most recently, the Principality of Monaco. The youngest son, Prince Valdemar, turned down the opportunity to sit on 2 thrones, and today his descendants are principally to be found in Denmark, France, and Switzerland. The story of the father-in-law of Europe begins when the poor Prince Christian of Glücksborg Castle becomes King of Denmark. And when the matchmaking games were over, his descendants came to mark a key period of Europe's history. From a time of dynastic politics to today's modern Europe, the descendants of the father-in-law of Europe have maintained their close ties across all borders.